Naomi Morris vanished as a college town in Norman, Oklahoma, was still aglow after late-night study sessions. On the night of September 14, 2006, a muggy autumn sky draped a thin layer of fog across the University of Oklahoma campus. At 9:52 p.m., a student passing by the library saw Naomi clutching a stack of books, hurrying toward the parking lot, her slender figure fading into the dim yellow glow of the streetlights. Minutes earlier, Naomi had texted her roommate, "Be home soon," a message that would later become the final clue. The campus gate guard vividly recalled the young woman passing by, her red sweater standing out in the darkness. What happened next has haunted Norman for years, leaving questions that have never found easy answers. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. In the fall of 2006, Norman, a college town nestled in the heart of Oklahoma, still carried the peaceful charm its residents had known for decades. Along the tree-lined streets surrounding the University of Oklahoma, students bustled about, yet the rhythm of campus life remained calm. Norman felt like a closed circle, where everyone recognized each other, from silver-haired professors in lecture halls to the baristas at the small coffee shop by the campus gate and the security guards stationed at the dorms. Amid this atmosphere, Naomi Morris, a 19-year-old freshman, began her first taste of independent life. Friends described Naomi as gentle and reserved, yet deeply introspective. She loved literature, especially classic novels she'd borrow from the library, often reading past dinner time. In her early college days, Naomi settled into dorm life, attending classes, working part-time at a nearby coffee shop, and returning to her room, often ending her day under the golden glow of the library's lamps. No one could have imagined that these simple routines would become the final pieces of an incomplete memory. On the night of September 14, 2006, Naomi followed her usual routine, except she left the library later than usual. As the clock in the reading room neared 10 p.m., Naomi gathered her books and sent her roommate a brief text. "Be home soon." It was an ordinary message, hinting at nothing amiss, but it later became the last known detail about her. Another student recalled briefly seeing Naomi hurrying through the library hallway, clutching her books tightly, her demeanor rushed yet quiet. At the far end of the parking lot, the campus gate guard confirmed seeing that familiar figure pass by, her long black hair blending into the faint yellow streetlights before disappearing toward the dark lot. No one could have foreseen that those fleeting glimpses would become critical testimony, for after that moment, Naomi vanished. She didn't return to her dorm, didn't show up to class the next morning, and left no further messages. Her roommate waited until midnight, repeatedly calling, but Naomi's phone only rang before falling silent. By morning, worry turned to panic when her family was informed their daughter hadn't come home. In the days that followed, friends in the town buzzed with concern, but that night, it was still just an unexplained disappearance. A single text from the library, "Be home soon," became the final trace of Naomi Morris, the young woman, just stepping into adulthood, who vanished into Norman's night. In Walker Hall's dorm room, Rachel, Naomi's roommate, waited until midnight, but Naomi never returned. At first, Rachel told herself Naomi might be out with friends, but as minutes ticked by, the sound of the wall clock heightened her unease. Rachel repeatedly called Naomi's phone, hearing only endless ringing followed by silence. No one answered. By nearly 2 a.m., worry turned to genuine fear. Trembling, Rachel called Naomi's parents in Oklahoma City, her voice choking, "Naomi still hasn't come back." Stunned, Mr. and Mrs. Morris were shaken. Mr. Morris threw on a jacket, started their old car, and sped down I-35 in the night, headlights cutting through thick fog. Less than 30 minutes later, they reached Norman, rushing to the dorm. Naomi's bed was empty, her blankets untouched, as if no one had slept there. Mrs. Morris collapsed, clutching her daughter's old sweater, while Mr. Morris dialed the Norman police. An on-duty officer arrived at the dorm. He opened his notebook, asking for details: height, weight, hair, last outfit Naomi wore, leaving the library. Rachel clearly recalled gray jacket, blue jeans, white sneakers. The officer jotted it down, trying to reassure them. She might just be staying somewhere with friends. But Mr. Morris immediately countered. Naomi would never do that, especially with class tomorrow morning. Though nothing could be confirmed yet, the police began a missing person report, entering Naomi into the system that night. By dawn, news of Naomi's disappearance spread through the dorms. Students gathered in hallways, whispering, many faces pale with worry. On a bulletin board, someone taped a photo of Naomi with a scribbled note. "Has anyone seen her after 10 p.m. last night?" A heavy atmosphere settled over the town, as Norman, typically peaceful, rarely saw crimes or disappearances. The vanishing of a young student from the heart of the university campus left the community in shock. Around 8 a.m. on September 15th, an unexpected call came to the police station. The caller, a Lake Thunderbird park worker, spoke with a trembling voice. "There's a silver Honda Civic parked in the east lot since last night. Window slightly open. No one's claimed it." The information immediately alerted investigators. A police team was dispatched to the scene. In a desolate parking area, Naomi's silver car sat motionless under an oak tree, fog misting the windshield. Inside, the driver's seat was adjusted forward, as if for someone petite. A few unfinished textbooks lay scattered on the passenger seat. The car showed no signs of tampering, and the keys were still in the ignition. Everything suggested Naomi had left the car in a hurry, abandoning it all before disappearing. The sight struck Naomi's parents like a knife to the heart. Mrs. Morris broke down sobbing, while Mr. Morris stood silently, his trembling hand gripping the steering wheel of a nearby police car. Rachel also cried. Naomi would never leave her car, never. An older officer shook his head, muttering, "If the car was here all night, something very bad happened." By noon, Norman police launched a full-scale search around Lake Thunderbird. Yellow tape cordoned off the area, and Naomi's Civic became the first piece of evidence. Forensics photographed, collected traces, and noted every detail, while trails around the lake were marked for a massive sweep. News of the missing University of Oklahoma student spread through Norman, casting a wave of anxiety from the campus to the entire town. The police's call for help was quickly answered, and within hours, hundreds of students, volunteers, rescue workers, and locals converged. Bright orange reflective vests stood out against the green forest as rows of people used sticks to comb through brush, meticulously covering every inch of ground. Officers divided the teams, some ventured deep into the woods, others followed trails, and another group searched the parking lot. Above, a patrol helicopter circled, its spotlight sweeping the vast lake, creating a scene both urgent and eerie. Trained dogs were brought in, their noses twitching as they sniffed Naomi's gray jacket, confirmed by Rachel. After a few minutes, the dogs eagerly led the way into the forest, following a rugged trail. Their barks tightened everyone's hearts with hope. Naomi's scent seemed clear, leading straight to an open clearing not far from the lake's edge. But there, the dogs suddenly lost the trail. They circled repeatedly, whining in frustration, unable to go further. Police marked the area, noting in the report, Naomi's scent ended at the clearing, no further traces found. The details sent chills through everyone. It was as if Naomi had vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, divers in black protective gear, equipped with oxygen tanks, plunged into Lake Thunderbird. The murky water limited visibility to a few meters. They groped along the lakebed, searching for clothes, shoes, or anything unusual. Each time bubbles surfaced, the crowd on shore held their breath, waiting. But for hours, all they retrieved were rotten branches, rusted cans, and debris. Lake Thunderbird revealed no further clues. On shore, Mr. and Mrs. Morris's faces grew pale, their initial hope swallowed by the water's heavy silence. Reporters swarmed the scene. TV crews set up at the parking lot, cameras panning across the cordoned-off Civic and the lines of people scouring the forest. Major Oklahoma City newspapers ran hot headlines. University of Oklahoma student missing, car abandoned by Lake Thunderbird. The once quiet Norman community was gripped by unease. Parents began warning their children not to go out after dark. Coffee shops and stores around campus buzzed with conversations revolving around one named Naomi. At a temporary tent, Naomi's parents knelt, hands clasped in prayer. A local pastor comforted them, holding Mrs. Morris's hand and whispering, "We'll find her one way or another." The image was captured by a camera, appearing on the front page of the Norman transcript the next morning. A desperate mother, amid hundreds of orange vests, looking skyward in prayer. The day passed in urgency and exhaustion. Every meter of land around the lake was scoured, every bush overturned, every roadside trash bin searched, but the result was nothing. As dusk fell, police ordered a temporary halt, promising to resume with more forces the next day. People left reluctantly, many glancing back, their eyes heavy with the feeling that Naomi was still somewhere nearby, yet unreachable. As night fell, Norman was no longer the peaceful town it once was. The wail of police sirens echoed, and helicopters occasionally swept their beams across the pitch-black lake. In the dorm, Rachel clutched her pillow, her eyes sunken from sleeplessness. She whispered to a few classmates, "Naomi never missed a single plan. She has to be somewhere." But the only response was silence. And at Lake Thunderbird, yellow tape still surrounded the Civic, a chilling testament to Naomi Morris's unexplained disappearance. After 3 days of fruitless searching, Norman police were forced to shift focus. They turned their attention to those closest to Naomi Morris, starting with her inner circle. The first name on the list was Jason Miller, Naomi's ex-boyfriend, a year older and studying economics at another school. Jason and Naomi had broken up over the summer, months before her disappearance, due to distance and minor relationship disputes. On September 16th, police summoned Jason to the station for questioning. Local media quickly spun a narrative, the jilted ex perhaps driven by jealousy. But when police investigated, Jason had a solid alibi. On the night of September 14th, he was in Dallas at a classmate's birthday party, confirmed by photos, witness statements, and credit card receipts. Jason appeared devastated, his eyes red as he spoke of Naomi. "I can't believe she's gone. Naomi was the kindest person I ever knew." The first, and seemingly most promising, lead collapsed. Next were Naomi's co-workers from her evening shifts at the small coffee shop near campus, where she worked part-time for extra cash. On the night of September 14th, Naomi clocked out at 8 p.m. and headed to the library. Police reviewed the shop's security footage, showing her leaving alone, looking tired but normal. Co-workers said Naomi was cheerful, showing no signs of unease. Cross-checking timelines, everyone at the shop was accounted for until 11 p.m., ruling them out of the time frame of Naomi's disappearance. Once again, the investigation hit a dead end. Determined not to overlook any possibility, police turned to Travis Holden, a 32-year-old, with a prior record of harassing students around Norman. He had appeared in reports since 2004, often loitering near the library and dorms, eyeing passing female students. On the night Naomi vanished, a vague witness claimed to have seen a tall, thin man in a baseball cap standing at the edge of the parking lot. Police promptly brought Travis in for questioning and collected his DNA. The Norman community was nearly convinced he was the culprit, but forensic results quickly cleared him. DNA from Naomi's jacket in the car didn't match Travis. He was released, and the glares of hatred that followed drove him out of Norman months later. With all three key persons of interest leading nowhere, the case pivoted to a curious detail, a report of a white pickup truck. A student claimed to have seen such a vehicle parked near Lake Thunderbird around 10 p.m., the same time Naomi left the library. A local resident near the lake also reported hearing a loud engine, likely a pickup, speeding away that night. Police combed through vehicle registration records in the area, but Norman and surrounding regions had thousands of white pickups, mostly common models like Ford F-150S or Chevrolet Silverados. Without a specific license plate or distinguishing features, this lead was like chasing a ghost, real but ungraspable. As days passed, pressure mounted on the police department. The media began questioning why, with hundreds searching, was there no trace? Why couldn't they track the white pickup? Editorials criticized the police for missing the critical window. The Morris family, exhausted, clung to Lake Thunderbird, hanging Naomi's photos on trees, praying in desperation. Each night, Miss Morris sat silently outside the dorm, eyes fixed on the road where her daughter sent her final text, hoping for a miracle. For the police, each false lead was like a blade eroding confidence. Solid alibis, unmatched DNA, vague license plates, all turned Naomi's case into a labyrinth with no exit. Norman, once tranquil, now whispered with fear. A girl could vanish from the heart of the community, and no one knew who was behind it. At night, dorms stayed lit. Students no longer dared walk alone late. In that heavy atmosphere, Naomi Morris's case began to fade, sinking into the cold shadows of an unsolved file. After weeks of initial frenzy and fragile hope, Norman's air grew thick with disappointment. The media dug into investigative flaws, repeatedly citing the golden 48 hours, the critical first hours after a disappearance, when the chance of finding someone alive is highest. What did Norman police do in those 48 hours? Headlined the Oklahoma Gazette, alongside a photo of Naomi's cordoned-off Civic. TV commentators dissected details. Why was Naomi's car only found the next morning, despite being in a busy lot? Why weren't library security cameras reviewed that night? Questions piled up, turning Naomi's disappearance from a family tragedy into a community scandal. Within the police department, pressure intensified. Officers admitted to indefensible errors. One major mistake was the handling of DNA evidence. When examining Naomi's jacket from the car, they found a small bloodstain and stray hairs. But the lab, overloaded with dozens of other cases, lacked the technology for thorough analysis. The samples were sealed and stored without priority testing. An internal report simply noted, DNA unidentified, not compared. This error later became a stain on Norman PD's record, a gap that might have altered the case's trajectory if handled differently. The Morris family rejected the excuse of limited resources. They appeared on TV, holding Naomi's photo, crying out to cameras, "Our daughter vanished right under their noses, and the police say they don't have enough staff to analyze a blood sample." Private pain turned into public outrage. The community split. Some empathized with the family, while others speculated Naomi might have left voluntarily. Rumors spread, academic pressure, a troubled relationship. But those who knew Naomi refuted this, insisting the gentle, disciplined girl would never vanish without a word. That winter, posters of Naomi's face began to fade and tatter in the wind. Police conducted smaller searches, all ending in disappointment. Initial suspects were cleared, the white pickup led nowhere, and the Civic only deepened the mystery. By spring 2007, news coverage of Naomi dwindled. The media moved on, and the town slipped back into its routine, albeit with a lingering shadow. In the police station's records room, Naomi Morris's file grew thick with reports, statements, and lab notes, yet yielded no concrete results. Norman's police chief faced a press conference, head bowed, admitting, "We haven't found answers." It was a confession that cut deeper into the family's hearts. Mr. and Mrs. Morris sat in the audience, hands clasped, eyes burning with anger and despair. By late 2007, after over 12 months of no progress, Naomi's case was classified as a cold case. A red stamp marked the file's cover, closing official efforts at the time. For the family, it was a second abandonment, first when Naomi vanished into the night, and now as justice turned its back. After Naomi Morris's case was officially labeled a cold case in late 2007, a chilling silence enveloped Norman. Police ceased large-scale searches. The thick file sat on a shelf, gathering dust. But for the Morris family, the case never closed. Mr. Morris, once fiery with anger, grew quietly depleted. His chronic heart condition worsened after the shock of his daughter's disappearance. He'd sit for hours at an empty dining table, fingers tapping, as if waiting for Naomi to walk through the door. Mrs. Morris, rather than succumbing to despair, channeled her pain into action. She joined Parents of the Missing in Oklahoma City, a group of families with lost loved ones. There, she found tear-streaked faces and unfinished stories like hers, their shared empathy helping her endure each day. Year after year, September 14th became a painful milestone. Each evening, the Morris family, Naomi's friends, and University of Oklahoma students gathered outside the library, lighting hundreds of white candles. They called it Night for Naomi. Faded posters were reprinted and plastered on lampposts and bulletin boards, clinging to faint hope that someone, somewhere, knew something. But every year was the same. Candles burned out. White balloons floated skyward, and no new leads emerged. Each vigil ended in tearful embraces and the pastor's somber voice, "We will not forget Naomi." Throughout the 2010s, Norman police occasionally revisited the file, re-examining the sealed DNA from Naomi's jacket, labeled unidentified, only to shelve it again due to outdated technology. Young investigators, new to the force, grew curious, even obsessed, with Norman's most famous unsolved case. But their efforts were stymied by reality, tight budgets, limited lab capabilities, and no fresh evidence to pursue. Meanwhile, Norman tried to move on. The coffee shop where Naomi worked stayed open under new management. Newer students might not know her face, but passing the library's bulletin board, they'd see her faded poster, her shy smile lingering. For older residents, Naomi became a whispered topic. How many years has it been since that girl disappeared? 10? Over 10. The obsession lingered like an unhealed scar in the town's collective memory. On local TV, whenever unsolved cases were discussed, Naomi Morris was a recurring example. Headlines flashed, "Cold Case 2006. Naomi Morris, OU student." The Morris family was often invited for interviews, sitting under studio lights, eyes hollow, recounting how their daughter vanished. Each retelling tore open old wounds, but they persisted, as it was the only way to keep Naomi's story alive in the public's mind. Naomi's former classmates graduated and moved away, but when visiting Norman, they stopped by Lake Thunderbird, leaving small bouquets or notes. "Naomi, we still miss you." Police patrolling the lake sometimes found wilted flowers at the clearing where the dogs lost her scent, noting in logs. People still come to remember. The years from 2007 to 2018 stretched like a dark void. No new evidence, no new witnesses, no significant progress. Mr. Morris's health deteriorated, requiring multiple hospitalizations for heart issues. Mrs. Morris remained steadfast, but loneliness gnawed in the long nights. Naomi's photos hung throughout their living room, fading but ever watchful, both comforting and reminding them justice remained elusive. For Norman's community, Naomi's disappearance became folklore. Parents told their children to avoid walking alone at night. New students heard the story as a cautionary tale. The town seemed to regain its calm, but beneath the surface lay an unhealed wound. Naomi Morris, a name on a cold case file, lingered in the air, a reminder that some questions remained unanswered. For 11 long years, from 2007 to 2018, Norman lived with that wound, a quiet, bloodless ache that throbbed whenever her name was mentioned, the girl who vanished into the night by Lake Thunderbird. 13 years after Naomi Morris disappeared, her file remained untouched in Norman's police archives, occasionally opened by curious young investigators. The Morris family continued their annual fall vigils, but the truth about their daughter seemed buried forever under time's dust. Then, on a late October morning in 2019, fate intervened. A trio of hunters roamed a dense forest in Cleveland County, a few miles from Lake Thunderbird's eastern shore. Familiar with the area, they often hunted deer in autumn, but that day, instead of wildlife, they stumbled upon something that froze them in place. Beneath a fallen tree, half buried in decayed leaves, lay a human skull. One hunter, trembling, brushed away the leaves, revealing scattered bones nearby. Horror-struck, they dropped their rifles and called Cleveland County Police. Within an hour, the quiet forest buzzed with dozens of patrol cars, yellow tape strung through trees, red and blue lights flashing through the foliage. When the forensic team arrived, they meticulously collected each bone. Despite years underground, the remains suggested a youthful body. Most clothing had decomposed, leaving only tattered fabric scraps. But among them stood out a red sweater, caked in mud, yet retaining its distinct hue. Nearby, in the dirt and rocks, they found a small silver bracelet. Engraved inside were two letters, NM. When photos of the bracelet reached the command post, a veteran officer from Naomi's 2006 case felt his heart seize. He whispered, "God, it's her." The evidence was sealed and rushed to the lab for DNA testing. Days later, results confirmed the bone DNA matched samples from Naomi's parents, stored for 13 years. After all that time, Naomi Morris was found. The news exploded like a storm. Evening broadcasts, led with Naomi Morris, EU student missing since 2006, found after 13 years. The Norman transcript headlined, "Pain resurfaces, Naomi was in the woods all along." Those who lived in Norman in 2006 recalled the chilling night she vanished. Conversations erupted in coffee shops and churches about the revelation of her fate. The Morris family received the news in tears. Mr. Morris, now frail from heart disease, sobbed into his hands. Mrs. Morris stood frozen, clutching the coroner's confirmation, whispering, "She was there for 13 years, just miles from home." In that moment, the faint hope that Naomi was alive was extinguished, replaced by pain mixed with relief. They finally knew where she was. In Norman, that September's annual vigil became the largest ever. Hundreds gathered outside the library, where Naomi sent her last text. They lit candles, held her photo, and read her favorite poems. Old friends who had left Norman returned, standing among the crowd, tears falling as Naomi's name was spoken. The memories of 2006 flooded back, painful but inescapable. For Norman police, finding Naomi's body wasn't just an answer to a 13-year question, it was a call to action. The case was no longer a disappearance, but officially a homicide. Abnormal cracks on Naomi's skull suggested an attack with a blunt object. Alongside the bracelet and sweater, this became key evidence. The dusty cold case file was pulled back onto the desk, now with utmost priority. But for the community, the truth that Naomi lay in the woods for over a decade was a shock that lingered. Questions arose: how did the 2006 search, with hundreds combing Lake Thunderbird, miss her resting place? Was she hidden elsewhere and moved later, or did exhausted searchers overlook her? Questions piled on, but no answers soothed the pain. In Norman households, parents held their children tighter, warning, "Never walk alone at night." New students heard the story as a dark legend, a cautionary lesson. Naomi was no longer just the girl missing since 2006. She became a symbol of a town shrouded in darkness. In 2019, when her body was found, that darkness enveloped Norman again, only this time, no one could pretend it hadn't always been there. Naomi's remains, the tattered red sweater, and the NEM bracelet, not only ended 13 years of waiting, but opened a heavy new chapter, the pursuit of her killer. But in that moment, before questions of the culprit arose, Norman faced a flood of painful memories, a reminder that a case thought forgotten could return, and that justice for Naomi Morris remained a long road ahead. In early November 2019, as Norman reeled from the discovery of Naomi Morris after 13 years, Oklahoma's forensic experts began a critical phase, detailed examination of the remains. The skeleton was brought to a state-of-the-art lab in Oklahoma City, where forensic pathologists and scientists carefully laid out each bone, reconstructing Naomi's form. Examining the skull, they found a detail that silenced the room, an abnormal crack running from the temple to the back. The fracture's jagged edges, sharp and uneven, weren't from natural decay. An expert tapped it lightly with a tool, confirming, "This is trauma from external force, likely a blunt object." This discovery shifted everything. Naomi wasn't just a missing person who died by accident or exhaustion, she was attacked. The evidence lay in her skull, proof someone had struck her. Simultaneously, forensic analysts processed the remaining fabric, especially the decayed red sweater. Under a microscope, they found faint dried blood stains and fibers with biological material. DNA was extracted and run through CODIS, the National Criminal Database. The team waited tensely as the computer blinked, then returned a cold result. No match found, no profile in the system matched. The outcome was both discouraging and galvanizing. Unlike 2006, 2019's technology had advanced. Cutting-edge genetic sequencing could analyze degraded DNA. The lead forensic scientist suggested, if we send this to labs with genetic genealogy, we could trace distant relatives of a suspect, narrowing the field. Norman police listened, sensing a new door cracking open. In the report to Cleveland County's prosecutor, a line was bolded, likely a homicide. The skull's fracture and unknown DNA on the sweater left no other interpretation. Naomi was murdered, her body left in the woods to hide the crime. With this, the case officially shifted from missing person to homicide investigation. The news spread rapidly, shocking Norman again. Many who hoped Naomi had left or met an accident now faced the brutal truth. She was killed. Headlines screamed, Naomi Morris cold case, from missing to murder. TV shows brought in experts to speculate that the killer might still live among the community. The Morris family, upon receiving the forensic report, was nearly broken. Mrs. Morris clutched the report, her trembling hands shaking, crying out through tears. I prayed for 13 years, but not for this. Mr. Morris, already frail, silently stared at Naomi's photo on the wall, as if apologizing for failing to protect his daughter. When the forensic conclusion was announced in late 2019, confirming that Naomi Morris was not only missing but murdered, the entire trajectory of the case shifted. Norman police, once heavily criticized for letting the case go cold for over a decade, knew they couldn't repeat past mistakes. In January 2020, under pressure from the community and media scrutiny, the police chief announced the formation of a dedicated unit, the Naomi Task Force. At the press conference, camera flashes flickered relentlessly as dozens of reporters jostled with questions. The chief spoke slowly, voice resolute, we will do everything possible with today's technology to bring the truth back to Naomi and her family. In the station's meeting room, a small team was assembled, combining veteran investigators from the 2006 case with younger faces skilled in modern techniques. They began by re-interviewing all prior witnesses. Conversations were reframed, no longer about a missing girl, but a murder victim. Among them was a student, now in his 30s, living in Texas, who recalled a detail he'd dismissed as unimportant in 2006 that night. Leaving the library, he saw a tall man in a dark jacket lingering near the bookshelves, following Naomi out the door. When asked why he hadn't reported it earlier, he lowered his head. I thought he was her friend. This new note made the task force sit up. It could be a critical piece overlooked in the chaotic early days. Next, the team revisited the entire case file. They stacked hundreds of pages of reports, crime scene photos, and forensic notes on the table. Amid the yellow documents, they found what everyone knew but never fully pursued, the DNA sample from Naomi's gray jacket, recovered from the Civic. The file noted, unidentified, stored. An error that once sparked public outrage now became an opportunity. The technology of 2006 couldn't analyze it fully, but 2020 was different. Task force experts debated eagerly. Some suggested sending the sample to the state lab for advanced sequencing. Others pushed bolder, collaborate with private labs pioneering genetic genealogy, which had cracked cold cases across the U.S. After weeks of deliberation, the decision was made. The DNA would go to a high-tech lab in Texas, capable of building a detailed genetic profile and cross-referencing public databases to trace distant relatives of a suspect. While awaiting results, investigators pursued other leads. They re-interviewed Naomi's coffee shop co-workers, the gate guard, and students in the library that night. Many statements overlapped, but small details emerged. A female student recalled that weeks before Naomi vanished, she seemed uneasy about someone staring at her persistently. Rachel, her roommate, mentioned Naomi once half-jokingly saying, "Sometimes I feel like I'm being watched." Dismissed years ago, these words now sounded like a warning. All this was documented in a report dozens of pages long. Naomi may have been stalked by a man familiar around the library or campus before her disappearance. Combined with the unknown DNA from the red sweater found with her remains, the task force believed the suspect's identity was within reach. For the Morris family, the investigation's restart was both a spark of hope and a bleeding wound. In a TV interview, Mrs. Morris sat beside Naomi's framed photo, voice hoarse. "I just hope this time they don't miss the chance." Mr. Morris, now so frail he needed a cane, added, "We don't have much time left. We just want justice for our daughter before we close our eyes." Their words echoed through the community, piling pressure on the police. In the media, new technology was hailed as a miracle. The Oklahoman wrote, "If genetic genealogy found the Golden State Killer, why can't it help Norman find Naomi's murderer?" Experts on TV explained how a DNA sample could trace a family tree, identifying distant relatives and narrowing suspects. For the community, it felt like the last hope after a decade of darkness. Within the task force, tension was palpable. Late nights, the records room's lights burned as investigators pored over details. They pinned Naomi's photo, crime scene images, and a Lake Thunderbird map to a whiteboard, red strings linking key points. It was a giant puzzle missing one final piece: the suspect's name. In June 2020, amid the shadow of the pandemic, a small evidence package was transported from Norman to Othram's lab in the Woodlands, Texas. Inside the sealed container were samples preserved for 13 years, faint blood stains and fabric fibers from the red sweater found with Naomi's remains. For Othram scientists, this wasn't just old DNA. It was the key to unlocking one of Oklahoma's most heartbreaking cold cases. The process began with re-extracting DNA, heavily degraded after a decade in harsh conditions. Next-generation sequencing machines ran for days to amplify and read genetic fragments. When initial data appeared, scientists confirmed they had enough to build a complete genetic profile. Impossible in 2006. From there, they moved to genealogy. By cross-referencing the DNA with public databases from people tracing their ancestry, scientists found faint matches. Initially, these were distant relatives, great-grandchildren of unrelated family branches. But layer by layer, a genealogical network formed. On a large meeting room screen, a sprawling family tree appeared, spanning generations. One branch was marked in red. Results showed a clear genetic link to the person whose DNA was on Naomi's sweater. Notably, some distant relatives in this branch lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Scientists handed the findings to the task force, stating the suspect likely came from a family rooted in that area. Receiving the report, investigators felt they'd found a compass in a maze. After 14 years of groping, they had a clear direction. The next task was narrowing the field. From the vast family tree, police, with data analysts' help, listed men of the right age with closer ties to the suspect's DNA branch. They screened residency records, focusing on those living or working near Norman. In 2006, the list shrank to about 10 names. Each name was a person, a story, and possibly a killer. The task force dug into their lives, jobs, criminal histories, ties to the University of Oklahoma, even old rumors. A chilling truth emerged. Some on the list were questioned in 2006, but cleared for lack of evidence. Back then, no one knew a speck of blood on a sweater could reveal a killer's lineage. Alongside this, police faced community and media pressure. Genetic genealogy, still new, sparked privacy debates. Articles questioned, is it fair to use citizens' DNA to hunt suspects? Cleveland County's prosecutor defended our sole goal is justice for Naomi Morris. We follow all legal protocols. Amid criticism, support persisted. A mother of another missing daughter wrote in a local paper, if this technology can bring justice for Naomi, please use it. In the task force's meeting room, computer screens blue glow lit investigators' faces. An Oklahoma map sprawled on the wall, red dots marking where listed men lived. Everything converged around a familiar area, Norman and nearby towns. The team leader pointed at the map, voice firm. The killer was here among us. Now we know his lineage, his possible homes. It's just about finding the right name. For the Morris family, news of a narrowed suspect list was a jolt after years of despair. In an interview, Mrs. Morris cried, "I thought she'd stay just a picture on the wall, but now we might know who took her from us." Mr. Morris, weakened by heart disease, clasped his wife's hand, saying, "Justice may come late, but it must come." For the task force, the road ahead was long and thorny, but they'd taken a decisive step. From an unknown DNA sample, genetic genealogy painted a family portrait, pointing to a specific group of suspects. For the first time in 14 years, Naomi Morris's case wasn't adrift in fog. As the meeting room's lights dimmed, the map glowed with red dots, like small flames signaling the truth was closer than ever. As the suspect list narrowed to a few men from the same genealogical branch, the Naomi task force zeroed in on each case. One name quickly stood out, making investigators sit up: Wesley Reed, 42, a freelance electrician who lived on Norman's outskirts, just miles from Lake Thunderbird. On paper, Wesley led a normal life: wife, kids, a house, steady work. But the deeper they dug, the more unsettling the picture became. Residency records showed that in 2006, when Naomi vanished, Wesley rented a small house near the road to Lake Thunderbird's east lot, where Naomi's Civic was found. A chilling coincidence emerged. Among the volunteers in the initial search, Wesley Reed's signature appeared. He'd worn an orange vest, joining the crowd scouring the woods in those chaotic early days. A young investigator exclaimed, "If it's him, for 13 years, the killer pretended to search for his own victim." But there was more. Reviewing old files, police found a 2004 report. A University of Oklahoma student accused Wesley, then working on dorm electrical repairs, of harassment, blocking her path and making lewd remarks. The case was dropped for lack of evidence, the victim too scared to testify. Though no conviction followed, this detail grew suspicious in the new context. The task force expanded their probe into Wesley. Financial records showed periods of unemployment, surviving on odd jobs and lingering around neighborhoods near the lake. Hospital records noted a bar fight injury. Former neighbors described him as gruff, always staring with a habit of nighttime walks. Scattered pieces began forming a portrait of a man with dark facets. Investigators opted for covert surveillance. One August 2021 evening, as Wesley drove his old pickup to a gas station, a task force team slipped a GPS tracker under his vehicle while he bought beer. From then, his movements appeared live on the command room screen. The digital map traced repetitive routes: mornings at electrical jobs, afternoons at convenience stores, evenings home. But one habit chilled investigators monthly. Wesley drove to Lake Thunderbird, sat in his truck for hours, smoking and staring at the water before leaving. On the screen, red dots clustered around the lake, exactly where Naomi was searched for in vain in 2006. Alongside electronic tracking, the team employed a trash pull tactic, collecting Wesley's garbage for biological evidence. When he set out his trash, a specialized truck retrieved it. Among beer cans, snack boxes, and cigarette butts, they found treasures: saliva-stained cigarette filters, a coffee cup with lip marks. All were sealed and sent for DNA testing. When results returned, the screen displayed what the team awaited. Wesley Reed's DNA perfectly matched the sample on Naomi's red sweater. No doubt remained. Wesley left traces on the evidence found with her body. A veteran investigator sank into his chair, exhaling as if unburdened by a 1,000-pound weight. Another clenched his fist, whispering, 15 years, we finally have him. This evidence was pivotal. From an obscure DNA sample, unreadable in 2006, modern technology and relentless persistence revealed the truth. In a report to Cleveland County's prosecutor, the task force leader wrote, "We collected multiple independent DNA samples from Wesley Reed's personal items. All matched the DNA on the victim's sweater. This is irrefutable scientific evidence. But for police, satisfaction wasn't the end. They monitored Wesley hourly, logging routines, routes, and meetings. Hidden cameras outside a neighbor's house captured him smoking in his backyard, brooding. Remote microphones recorded his grumbling phone calls with clients. Each detail enriched the file, sharpening Wesley's portrait. He didn't know every step. Every discarded cigarette butt was tightening a legal noose around him. For the Morris family, police couldn't reveal all but shared that a major breakthrough occurred. Mrs. Morris clasped her husband's hand in a private meeting, tears streaming. "We've waited so long. If it's him, please bring our daughter justice." Mr. Morris only nodded, his cloudy eyes glinting with rare hope. In Norman's community, leaked news of a DNA match stirred the heavy air of 15 years. Whispers spread in coffee shops and university halls. If it's him, we lived beside a killer and didn't know. For the task force, the DNA match wasn't just evidence, but a vow. The long journey from Naomi's disappearance reached a turning point. They knew the next phase, securing an arrest warrant, preparing for trial, would be tough. But for the first time in 15 years, they could face the Morris family and say, "We've found the one responsible." In the familiar darkness of the cold case file, Wesley Reed's name now stood out, blazing like a verdict awaiting its reading, before the entire community. In January 2022, after nearly 2 years of covert evidence collection, Wesley Reed's file swelled to hundreds of pages. It contained everything: perfect DNA matches, suspicious patterns around Lake Thunderbird, and a witness's account of Naomi being followed in the library on September 14, 2006. Cleveland County's prosecutor, after closed-door meetings with the task force, made a decision. It was time to end 16 years of waiting. A formal arrest warrant was approved, along with a search warrant for Wesley's Stillwater property. Before dawn on January 22, police cars quietly lined the serene street where the Reed family lived. Oklahoma's winter sky was overcast, cold breath rising from the special task force officers awaiting orders. At 6 a.m., the team leader signaled. The door was pounded, voices booming. "Police, we have a warrant." Inside, hallway lights flickered on. Seconds later, the door swung open, revealing Wesley in pajamas, face stunned. In moments, handcuffs snapped onto his wrists, before his sleepy wife and children. His wife screamed in panic. "Is this a mistake?" He helped search for that girl. But police didn't respond, reading the charge clearly. "Wesley Reed, you are under arrest for the murder of Naomi Morris in 2006. Wesley's wife and children's cries echoed through the small house. Neighbors, drawn by sirens and commotion, gathered outside, shocked to see Wesley escorted to a patrol car, head bowed, hands cuffed. A middle-aged man shook his head, whispering, "No way, he helped us hang Naomi's posters back then." A woman clutched her chest. "God, he was right next to us for years." The shock spread like wildfire. Within hours, major news outlets blared. Suspect in Naomi Morris case arrested after 16 years. Images of Wesley, pale under flashing cameras, dominated front pages. TV channels looped footage of police cars leaving Stillwater, neighbors standing frozen. At the station, the mood was heavy. Veteran investigators, who searched for Naomi since 2006, exchanged looks, eyes red. They knew this wasn't an easy victory, but the result of thousands of hours, sleepless nights, and years of public criticism. The task force leader, in a brief afternoon press conference, said, "We promised the Morris family the truth would be found. Today, we kept that promise." The Morris family was notified as the arrest was finalized. Mrs. Morris nearly collapsed, clutching her chest upon hearing Wesley's name. She choked. "I remember his face. He stood there, putting up Naomi's poster outside the library. I thanked him." Mr. Morris, in an armchair with an oxygen tube, shook his head silently. After 16 years, they finally had a name, a face. The man who took their daughter. But the relief mingled with gut-wrenching pain. The killer wasn't a stranger, but someone who feigned joining their search. In the hours after his arrest, Wesley Reed was taken to an interrogation room at Norman's police station. The small, gray-walled room held a cold metal table and 2 chairs, a familiar setup meant to unnerve. Facing Wesley were 2 seasoned task force investigators who'd followed the case since its revival. They started with simple questions, voices calm. "Do you remember Naomi Morris? Did you ever meet her at the University of Oklahoma Library on September 14, 2006? Wesley looked up, his gray eyes glinting with defiance. He denied immediately, "I don't know Naomi. I never spoke to her." When investigators noted he lived near Lake Thunderbird and joined the volunteer search, he shrugged. "I just wanted to help. The whole town was searching, so was I." His tone was steady, but his fingers tapped the table lightly, a nervous tell seasoned investigators spotted. The interrogation stretched for hours. They pressed on details, Wesley's habit of driving to the lake years later, his history of harassing a student, and gaps in his whereabouts the night Naomi vanished. But he clung to his claim. "I had nothing to do with it." "You're mistaken." He leaned back, arms crossed, feigning calm. Then an investigator placed a thick file on the table, opening to pages bolded with DNA results. The gray-haired man, voice raspy, said slowly, "Wesley, this is science. Your DNA was found on the red sweater, recovered with Naomi's body. Not once, but multiple samples, cigarette butts, a coffee cup, beer cans you discarded, all match. How do you explain that?" The room's air grew heavy. Wesley stared at the papers, lips pursed. For the first time since his arrest, he didn't respond immediately. The prolonged silence made the investigators exchange glances. They knew the blow had landed. Wesley took a deep breath, then said softly, his earlier confidence gone, "Might have met her, but I didn't do anything. I didn't kill anyone." This shift in his story was documented word for word. The investigators pressed, "If you met Naomi, why was your DNA on her sweater?" Wesley shook his head, rubbing his hair. "I don't remember. It was so long ago." His vague, illogical answers showed his wall of denial cracking. But before the interrogation could go further, the door swung open. A lawyer hired by Wesley's family arrived, demanding all questions stop. "My client won't answer further without legal guidance," he said icily. The investigators complied, closing the file and packing the recorder. The interrogation ended in tense air, with Wesley sitting silently, eyes on the metal table, no longer defiant. Outside in the hallway, task force members waited. Hearing the report, one angrily punched the wall. "We were so close to a confession, but the leaders stayed calm. We have what matters most, the DNA. He can stay silent, but the evidence won't." In the holding cell, Wesley sat with his head bowed, hands clasped. That night, he didn't sleep. Surveillance cameras caught him rubbing his hair, muttering to himself. Though no formal confession came, his changed story after the DNA evidence was a sign. Prosecutors knew would be a weapon in court. News of the interrogation leaked, further shaking Norman. Headlines read, "Reed denies but falters under DNA evidence." Locals whispered, "If he's innocent, why change his story?" Doubt turned to outrage, and Wesley Reed's name became tied to a crime the town couldn't forgive. The interrogation ended, but the legal storm was just beginning. Justice for Naomi Morris still needed to be decided in court, where the DNA evidence, years of covert surveillance, and Wesley's suspicious silence would be laid bare. After the interrogation halted due to the defense attorney's arrival, the Naomi task force knew the next step was to solidify their case with undeniable physical evidence. A search warrant for Wesley Reed's Stillwater home was signed by the prosecutor within the week, authorizing police to comb through the house, garage, storage, and electronics. On a February 2022 morning, a convoy of police cars descended on the quiet neighborhood where the Reed family's red brick house stood among leafless winter trees. Neighbors peered through curtains as police strung yellow tape around the yard. The crime scene team, in white hazmat suits, entered with cameras and evidence bags. The house's air was cold, furniture orderly but dusty. suggesting many items hadn't been touched in years. They searched every corner. In the garage, under an old wooden crate, they found a rusted knife, its 15 centimeters blade, crusted with dark brown residue. The knife was sealed and sent to the lab. Preliminary results confirmed the residue was human blood, matching Naomi's DNA. In the living room, an investigator opened a drawer and found an old map of the Lake Thunderbird area. Red ink lines zigzagged around the east parking lot and a forest where Naomi's body was later found. Scribbled in the margin were the words, "Empty field, no one passes." The team fell silent, exchanging glances. This was no coincidence. Wesley had marked the location like a personal code, now a critical piece in the prosecution's case. The most chilling discovery came from an old office. In a corner cabinet, they found a dusty desktop computer, its monitor caked with grime. The hard drive was removed and sent to the station's digital forensics unit. After hours, technicians recovered a series of 2006 text files. One, named journal.doc, froze the team. In it, Wesley had written fragmented entries about his feelings that September. The starkest line. "A girl disappeared. No one knows, only me." Those words were a chilling, implicit confession. He named no one, but the context aligned perfectly with Naomi's disappearance. Legal experts printed the entirety, adding it to the file. A young investigator whispered, "He lived with this secret for 16 years, and he wrote it himself." Beyond direct evidence, police seized other items. A wooden box with photos of Norman's forests, clipped 2006 news articles about Naomi's case, and an old rope buried in the backyard. Each piece, though small, formed a clear picture. Wesley wasn't just a suspect by chance. He was obsessed, keeping mementos of the disappearance in his own home. In the station's meeting room, evidence was laid out in a row, the bloodied knife in a sealed bag, the Lake Thunderbird map with red marks, the printed journal file, and photos of the computer drive. The task force leader tapped the table, voice firm. "We have everything. This isn't just suspicion, this is the truth." The Morris family was invited to hear the report, seeing the map with red lines and the journal entry. "A girl disappeared," Mrs. Morris sobbed, while Mr. Morris sat motionless, eyes closed. The mother choked out, "All these years we thought Naomi was a random victim, but he planned it. He marked that place." Cleveland County's prosecutor promptly drafted a detailed indictment. The items from Wesley's home bolstered the case, proving not just DNA but premeditation, obsession, and motive. The indictment stated, Defendant Wesley Reed kept evidence and notes reflecting direct involvement in Naomi Morris's death. This is no longer coincidence, but intentional criminal conduct. Media across the state reported the search. Images of the bloodied knife and marked map aired on TV, sparking public outrage. One newspaper wrote, "He hung posters for Naomi, while the map hiding her body sat in his drawer." Norman and Stillwater buzzed with fear and anger. Wesley's neighbors couldn't believe it, but the stark evidence weakened any defense. With all collected, Naomi Morris's case file was no longer scattered pages, but a rock-solid accusation. The knife, map, journal, all pointed to one name, Wesley Reed. As the prosecutor closed the thick file, he told the team a chilling line, "He'll never be free again." In March 2022, after all evidence from Wesley Reed's home was added to the file, Cleveland County's prosecutor finalized the indictment. The nearly 400-page document pieced together a clear picture. Naomi Morris was murdered, and Wesley Reed was responsible. The highest charge was explicit, first-degree murder. Lead prosecutor Ellen Hart stood before TV cameras at a press conference, voice resolute. "We believe we have irrefutable evidence to convict Wesley Reed. This case isn't just for one family, but for all of Norman." Immediately, Wesley's defense team filed objections, targeting the case's weakest link, the genealogy DNA evidence. In a court petition, they demanded the exclusion of all genetic genealogy results, arguing that police use of public DNA databases violated privacy rights. Our client never consented to his DNA being used this way, lead defense attorney Daniel Price said in a brief press conference. If this evidence is admitted, any American could be targeted just because a distant relative uploaded DNA online. The argument exploded beyond the courtroom. Media dubbed it the 21st century DNA legal battle. Some legal experts sided with the defense, warning of ethical consequences. Today we cheer technology catching a killer. Tomorrow, who ensures millions' DNA isn't misused? Conversely, supporters argued victim justice must come first. An Oklahoman editorial wrote, "Naomi Morris has no voice. The DNA on her sweater is that voice. Rejecting this evidence rejects justice." In the preliminary hearing, Prosecutor Hart countered forcefully cases using genealogy to solve cold cases, stressing full legal compliance. "We accessed no private data beyond what users voluntarily shared," she said. Genetic genealogy isn't a privacy violation, it's a lawful tool to protect the community. The debate spanned days with experts testifying. Othram lab scientists explained the process, building the family tree, narrowing to distant relatives, and how police later collected Wesley's DNA directly from discarded items, cigarette butts, coffee cups, beer cans. The incriminating sample, they stressed, came not from public databases, but from Wesley's own discarded items. Alongside the legal fight, prosecutors prepared to persuade the jury. They compiled all physical evidence: the bloodied knife, the marked Lake Thunderbird map, the A Girl Disappeared journal. Each piece was arranged into a logical narrative, showing Wesley didn't just stumble into the crime, but planned and obsessed over it. Hart told investigators, "We're not just bringing science to court, we must bring Naomi's story, a 19-year-old girl, robbed of her youth, betrayed for 16 years. The Morris family attended a pre-trial briefing. In a small room, Mrs. Morris listened to the prosecutor's plan, eyes welling. "I know some will say we invaded privacy," she sighed. "But my daughter has no rights left to protect. She only has the right to justice." Mr. Morris, hand trembling on Naomi's photo, nodded. "I want the jury to hear her name every day of the trial." Meanwhile, Norman was abuzz. Town halls, churches, and coffee shops debated the case. Some worried about genealogy DNA precedents, but most backed the prosecution. A former neighbor of Wesley spoke on TV. He laughed, "Helped us hang Naomi's posters. Now it's all a lie. If DNA is the only way to get him, use it." By June 2022, Cleveland County's court ruled the genealogy DNA evidence was admissible. The decision was a major victory for the prosecution and resonated nationally. Experts noted the Naomi Morris case could set a precedent for future genealogy DNA use. In the records room, hearing the court rejected the defense's motion, investigators embraced, many tearing up. After 16 years of being seen as a failure, the case could stand in court. The task force leader smiled, saying softly, "Naomi has her voice. Now it's time for justice to speak." Preparations for the trial grew urgent. Prosecutors, police, and forensic experts met near daily to rehearse presentations, arrange witness order, and brace for defense counterattacks. Both sides knew when the trial opened, the eyes of the state and nation would watch. At the heart of it all, Naomi Morris's name resounded. No longer just a painful memory, but a call for justice after 16 long years. In March 2023, after nearly a year of intense preparation, Wesley Reed's trial began at Cleveland County Courthouse in Norman, Oklahoma. From early morning on the first day, the courthouse square teemed with reporters, satellite news trucks lined up. Statewide media descended, with national outlets sending correspondents for live coverage. The televised trial became an event. Norman and the nation followed closely. The Morris family arrived early. Mrs. Morris in black clutched Naomi's framed photo, a 19-year-old smiling gently, long hair over her shoulders. Mr. Morris, frail and using a cane, insisted on joining his wife in the courtroom. They sat in the front row behind the prosecution, as if to ensure Naomi wouldn't face justice alone. Many of Naomi's old classmates attended, carrying white flowers, symbols of unhealed memory. The courtroom's air was heavy as Wesley Reed was escorted in. In a dark suit, head slightly bowed, he avoided all cameras. Beside him sat his defense team, faces stern, ready for a fierce, legal battle. Whispers rose from the audience. He searched for Naomi with us. 16 years, he lived like nothing happened. Outrage and shock filled the space. As the judge entered, all stood. The gavel's bang opened the most significant trial in the county in years. Prosecutor Ellen Hart rose, stepping to the center, eyes locked on the jury. She began with a line no one forgot. For 16 years, justice was buried, but today, DNA has brought the truth back. Naomi Morris finally has a voice. Her voice rang clear, powerful. She described Naomi as a 19-year-old full of dreams, leaving the library with books, texting, "Be home soon," the last her family heard. She stressed when Norman searched for Naomi, Wesley Reed was there, but he wasn't seeking truth, he was hiding it. She listed evidence, perfect DNA matches, the bloodied knife, the Lake Thunderbird map with red marks, the journal entry, "A girl disappeared." Each was displayed on a large screen for the jury to see. Defense attorney Daniel Price countered, trying to disrupt the initial consensus. He stressed, genealogy, DNA is a dangerous tool, violating every citizen's privacy. You may accept it today, but tomorrow, it could turn against you. He suggested the evidence from Wesley's home might be planted or misinterpreted, not collected in 2006. Yet his voice lacked conviction against the prosecution's weighty evidence. Throughout the morning, cameras panned the audience, lingering on Mrs. Morris, quietly wiping tears, eyes fixed on Naomi's photo. Mr. Morris gripped his wife's hand, occasionally glancing at Wesley with not hatred, but the exhaustion of a father worn by years of pain. The scene choked the room. The opening day stretched on. The prosecution detailed the investigation, Naomi's 2019 remains discovery, the skull's fracture, the unknown DNA, and sending samples to Othram in Texas. Hart told the jury, "This isn't coincidence, this is science, and science points straight to Wesley Reed." The defense repeatedly objected, but most were overruled. The judge reminded, this trial isn't about judging technology, but finding the truth about Naomi Morris. The quote spread widely in evening news. Outside, hundreds of Norman residents gathered, many with candles and flowers. They set up a small memorial in the courthouse yard, Naomi's smiling photo framed amid white wreaths. A middle-aged woman whispered to a camera, "Naomi's like our town's daughter, we've waited 16 years for this day." As the opening adjourned, the judge announced the trial would continue with witness testimonies and detailed evidence. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the courtroom's glass, casting a golden glow on Naomi's photo in Mrs. Morris's hands. Though justice wasn't yet settled, the sense that truth was finally spoken brought tears to many. That evening's news opened with Hart's line, 16 years justice was buried, DNA brought the truth back. It wasn't just a legal statement but a promise to Naomi, that the young woman robbed of youth and life would finally be heard. As studio lights dimmed and Norman's courthouse closed for the day, the community lingered, whispering Naomi's name like a shared prayer. On the trial's second day, the courtroom was packed, not a seat empty. After the dramatic opening, prosecutor Ellen Hart knew she needed to turn cold data into a clear story for the jury. Ordinary citizens unfamiliar with labs. She called her first witness, Dr. Laura Bennett, Othram's geneticist. Laura took the stand, gray hair neat, clutching a thick file. In a calm voice, she explained genetic genealogy, extracting degraded DNA from the red sweater found with Naomi's remains, building a genetic profile, and comparing it to public databases. On a large screen, a family tree sprawled across generations, narrowing to Wesley Reed's branch. Every step was verified by science, Laura said. Ultimately, we confirmed the DNA on Naomi's sweater matched Wesley Reed's, collected from his discarded items, cigarette butts, coffee cups, beer cans. The match probability is 1 in 7.8 trillion. Scientifically, there's no mistake. The jury listened intently. Some nodded at the emphasized match odds. Hart closed her questioning. So, Dr. Bennett, what does this DNA evidence tell us? Laura looked at the jury, that Wesley Reed was with Naomi Morris and touched the sweater she wore when killed. Murmurs spread. In the Morris family's row, Mrs. Morris clutched her daughter's photo, tears streaking her cheeks. After the science, the prosecution turned to human testimony, memories overlooked or downplayed in 2006's chaos. The next witness was Michael Torres, a former OU student now in Texas. Michael took the stand, voice trembling, recalling that night. I left the library around 9:45. I saw Naomi ahead, carrying books, and a tall man in a dark jacket stood near the exit. I remember because he kept staring. When Naomi left, he followed. Michael lowered his head. In 2006, I thought he might be a friend. I didn't realize, when Hart asked if he recognized the man, Michael looked up, pointed at the defendant. That's him, Wesley Reed. A rumble swept the courtroom. Wesley kept a stoic face, but his eyes flickered with tension. The third witness was Rachel, Naomi's 2006 roommate, now graying. She took the stand, voice choking. Naomi told me once she felt watched in the library. She half joked, "This guy keeps staring, it's creepy." I didn't know who, but hearing the description, I believe it was Wesley. Rachel paused, tears spilling. If I'd told Naomi to report it then, things might have been different. Hart reassured her, telling the jury, this isn't Rachel's fault. The only fault lies with the man who hunted Naomi. Turning to the jury, she said firmly, Naomi sensed danger. Today we see that danger had Wesley Reed's face. Defense attorney Daniel Price stood trying to shake the witnesses. He pressed Michael. You saw a man 16 years ago in dim library light, and now claim it's my client. You could be mistaken. Michael held firm. I remember those eyes, I can't forget. To Rachel, Price pushed. Naomi only vaguely mentioned being watched, no names. It could have been anyone. Rachel replied, voice steady. I saw him around the library after. I believe Naomi was right. Despite the defense's efforts, the testimonies left a strong impression. The jury now had not just dry DNA, but a vivid image. Naomi leaving the library, a man following, and Naomi voicing fears of being watched. The second day closed heavily. Headlines blared. Witnesses point to Wesley Reed in court, and Naomi's roommate confirms her fear of being stalked. TV replayed Michael Torres, pointing at Wesley, calling it the trial's turning point. Outside the courthouse, Norman residents gathered in larger numbers, holding signs reading Justice for Naomi. An elderly woman, who joined the 2006 search, told a reporter, I remember when he searched with us, holding Naomi's poster. Thinking back, it gives me chills. He was there, smiling at us. In the courtroom, as lights dimmed, Wesley Reed sat motionless, his face no longer defiant. He knew each piece of evidence, each testimony, was tightening the noose around him. With each passing day, justice for Naomi Morris drew closer than ever. On the third day of the trial, Wesley Reed's defense team launched their counterattack. From the start, they clung to one argument. The genealogy DNA evidence, key to naming Wesley, was a double-edged sword, violating privacy and setting a dangerous precedent. Lead attorney Daniel Price rose, tall and lean, walking slowly to the jury. He began firmly. You cannot let vague technology become the handcuffs on a citizen. Today, they say DNA data from a genealogy website led to Wesley Reed. But have you ever agreed your family's DNA, your own DNA, could be used for this? If you accept it, tomorrow any of you could be dragged into court just because a distant relative uploaded DNA online. His words echoed in the courtroom. Some jurors frowned, feeling their personal rights touched. The media seized it, calling it the defense's privacy gambit, their ace card. But prosecutor Ellen Hart swiftly objected, reiterating that the incriminating DNA came not from public databases, but Wesley's own discarded items, beer cans, cigarette butts, coffee cups. Still, Price had planted doubt in the jury's minds, one the prosecution knew would take effort to erase. The defense didn't stop there, calling a surprise witness, Mark Jefferson, Wesley's former Stillwater neighbor. Mark took the stand, voice calm. On the evening of September 14, 2006, I remember Wesley was home. I borrowed tools from his garage around 9:30 p.m. Saw him drinking beer, watching TV. Price seized the moment. You heard it. A witness confirms Wesley Reed was home when Naomi disappeared. So how could he commit the crime? The courtroom buzzed. The Morris family froze, while Wesley looked up, his face briefly relieved. But Hart stood, requesting an objection. Calmly, she presented digital evidence, location data from Wesley's old 2006 cell phone, retrieved from carrier records. On a large screen, a data table appeared. Wesley's phone pinged a tower near his home at 8:47 p.m. But by 9:02, it jumped to a tower south of Norman, near Lake Thunderbird. Hart stated, "This proves Wesley left home after 9 p.m. The witness may misrecall the day or time, but data never lies." The rebuttal shifted the courtroom's mood instantly. Jurors exchanged confused looks. Price tried to salvage, suggesting the phone data could be flawed due to system errors or storage issues. "We're talking about records from 16 years ago," he stressed. But Hart called a telecommunications expert to the stand. He explained that cell tower data was accurately preserved, tamper-proof, and verified by multiple sources. "The phone doesn't lie," he concluded. The defense pushed further with minor witnesses. A former co-worker saying Wesley went to work normally the next day, showing no odd behavior. A friend calling him a loving family man. But these testimonies, against DNA and phone data, felt like a faint breeze. Hart struck at the weakness. No one says a killer can't be a father, neighbor, or electrician. But his DNA was on Naomi's sweater. His phone was near where she vanished. No witness can deny those facts. In the public gallery, Norman residents sat silently. Many who wanted to believe Wesley innocent, that it was all a mistake, now faced cold evidence. A woman whispered, "I remember him helping hang Naomi's posters, but DNA doesn't lie." The third day closed tensely. Media reported feverishly. Defense counters with privacy. Prosecution hits back with phone data. 16-year-old phone pings expose alibi lie. TV replayed the expert pointing at the screen, explaining how Wesley's phone signal moved from his home to Lake Thunderbird as Naomi vanished. In the jury's deliberation room, silence reigned. They knew the defense had played its strongest cards, but seemed unable to break the DNA and technology chain. In Cleveland County Jail's dim cell, Wesley Reed sat with head bowed, hands clasped, eyes vacant. For the first time since the trial began, he seemed to feel the walls of justice closing in. In the front row, Mrs. Morris whispered to her daughter's photo, "Naomi, you've spoken. Justice isn't far now." After nearly 3 weeks of intense trial, with both prosecution and defense presenting final arguments, the case reached its decisive phase. The 12 Norman jurors were sequestered, cut off from media and outside pressure. For 2 days, they debated, reviewing testimonies, the bloodied knife, the Lake Thunderbird map with red marks, and the irrefutable DNA match. Some wrestled with the defense's privacy argument, but ultimately agreed the DNA evidence was undeniable. On the third morning, the courtroom was packed. Live broadcasts aired, Norman watching in heavy silence. As the jury entered, all eyes fixed on them. The judge asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" The jury spokesperson stood, voice trembling but firm. "Yes, Your Honor. We find the defendant Wesley Reed guilty of the first-degree murder of Naomi Morris." The room fell silent for seconds, then erupted in choked sobs. Mrs. Morris collapsed onto her husband's shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. Morris, trembling, clasped his wife's hand, tears streaming, his frail shoulders shaking. They'd waited 16 years for this day. In the public gallery, Many cried, while some whispered, "Justice has finally come." The judge banged the gavel, announcing the sentence, life imprisonment without parole. His voice rang firm. Defendant Wesley Reed will spend the rest of his life behind bars, never regaining freedom. Wesley sat motionless, face pale, staring at the table. No defiance, no denials. As police cuffed and led him away, his head hung, steps heavy as if bearing a boulder. Outside, hundreds of Norman residents gathered since morning, holding candles and white flowers. Hearing the verdict, they clapped, not loudly cheering, but a slow, heavy applause, a collective exhale, after 16 years of fear and unease. An elderly woman from the 2006 search team told a reporter, "I remember him searching with us. Now we know the truth. This town can finally sleep." Headlines blared. Wesley Reed sentenced to life without parole in Naomi Morris case. TV replayed the Morrises crying in court, an image of belated but deserved justice. An editorial wrote, "No sentence brings Naomi back, but at least Norman has found truth and solace." As dusk fell on Norman, candles lit before the courthouse glowed in the breeze. Naomi's photo, her 19-year-old smile, sat amid white wreaths. In Oklahoma's chilly wind, the community exhaled, not in joy, but because a 16-year wound closed with two words, justice. The life without parole verdict for Wesley Reed ended a painful 16-year chapter, but the case's aftershocks lingered. For months after, Norman and Stillwater, communities that saw Reed as an ordinary neighbor, grappled with quiet division. Some fully believed the verdict, citing DNA, the bloodied knife, the map, and journal as undeniable. Others whispered in coffee shops and church groups that Reed might be a victim of new technology, that no one saw him act. These debates weren't just about guilt or innocence, but reflected deeper fears about how genealogy DNA was reshaping law. National media seized the wave. The Washington Post ran, "Oklahoma case becomes landmark for forensic genealogy." Experts debated, a scientific triumph or privacy invasion. The New York Times called it a precedent case, a turning point for reopening cold cases nationwide with genetic genealogy. A law professor noted, "We're entering a new era where DNA tells not just the victim's story, but opens doors to culprits hiding for decades." In Norman, the Morris family turned pain into purpose. Weeks after the verdict, they erected a memorial plaque for Naomi by Lake Thunderbird, where her silver Civic was found in 2006 and where painful memories began. The plaque read, "Naomi Morris, 1987, 2006. Your light still shines, though darkness once hid it." Each September 14th, friends, teachers, and strangers gathered to lay flowers and light candles. The lake, once a symbol of mystery and loss, became a place for communal remembrance. The University of Oklahoma, where Naomi was a freshman literature major, joined to preserve her memory. The administration established the Naomi Morris Memorial Scholarship for students passionate about literature and writing, as Naomi dreamed. At the scholarship's launch, a professor said tearfully, "Naomi didn't get to write her own pages. Through this scholarship, her dream will live on in others." For the community, Naomi's case became a collective scar, both painful and awakening. Norman families joined student safety groups. The university enhanced library and parking lot lighting, and offered free self-defense classes. In Stillwater, where the Reeds lived, neighbors reeled from sharing barbecues or sending kids to play at his house, unaware a killer lurked nearby. Trust cracked, replaced by quiet vigilance. Genealogy DNA itself became a national debate centerpiece. Some states drafted stricter laws on public database use, while privacy groups petitioned federal courts. But for families of the missing, Naomi's case was hope. If justice came after 16 years for her, it could for their daughters, brothers, or loved ones. The Morris family, after years of grief, could light candles for Naomi without the haunting unanswered question. At a memorial, Mrs. Morris said, "Justice came late, but it came. Naomi has her voice, and it will forever change how this community sees truth, responsibility, and each other. Mr. Morris, frail, sat silently beside her, but a faint smile on his weathered face spoke volumes. As night fell on Norman, candles at Naomi's memorial cast flickers on the lake. From there, the memory of a 19-year-old robbed of her future was no longer just pain, but a symbol of science's power, justice's persistence, and a community's undying love for one of its own. As many whispered at the memorial, Naomi is gone, but her story will forever remind us that justice, though late, can change everything. Naomi Morris's story, a University of Oklahoma freshman who vanished in 2006 and found justice after 16 years, is not just a personal tragedy, but reflects challenges in American life today. The detail of Naomi's final text to her roommate, "Be home soon," before disappearing on the short walk from library to dorm, reminds us that even seemingly safe places like college campuses hold risks. Her Honda Civic, abandoned near Lake Thunderbird, unnoticed early, underscores the importance of community response and collective vigilance. The delay in analyzing DNA, stored for years, shows how technology and process delays can stall justice, wounding families and communities. Today in the U.S., we have powerful tools, from security cameras and smartphones to DNA databases. Yet Naomi's case warns, technology only matters when used timely and correctly. Norman police missed the golden 48 hours, leaving the Morris family in pain for 16 years. The lesson is to heed even small danger signals: an unanswered text, an oddly parked car, a complaint about being followed. At the community level, OU's Naomi Morris Scholarship and the family's Lakeside Memorial show painful memories can fuel change. Norman learned justice may come late, but persistence, faith, and unity make a difference. In today's world, we should embrace vigilance, community support, and trust in justice as foundations, so no other Naomi Morris waits 16 years for truth. Thank you for joining us in the journey for justice for Naomi Morris. If you believe these stories deserve to be heard, please subscribe to stay updated. See you in the next video, where we'll explore more cases that forever changed American communities.